Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to Hope is Kindled, where stories, science, philosophy, and the human heart come together to remind us that even in the darkest moments, meaning is still possible. Over the course of this journey, now more than 83 episodes and a constellation of bonus conversations, we've spent a lot of time asking a deceptively simple question: what keeps a human being going? We've explored suffering and night, moral choice in the brothers Karamazov, resistance in 1984, imagination in Don Quixote, love as defiance and a wrinkle in time. Tonight, we turn to a work that doesn't come from the shelf labeled literature, but belongs beside all of them. Tonight, we talk about flow, not hustle, not productivity, not optimization, but attention, engagement, and the fragile, stubborn human ability to find meaning even when circumstances refuse to cooperate. Who is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and why flow exists at all? Csikszentmihalyi's ideas did not emerge from comfort. Born in 1934 in Hungary, he grew up in a Europe fractured by war, occupation, and ideological collapse. As a child, he watched adults, educated, cultured adults, lose purpose overnight. Jobs vanished. Institutions failed. Moral frameworks shattered. Meaning dissolved. The question that haunted him was not why people suffer. History answers that easily. The question was, why do some people remain whole while suffering? That question places him in direct conversation with Viktor Frankl, whose man's search for meaning we've echoed throughout Hope is Kindled. The idea that meaning is not given, it is made. What Csikszentmihalyi noticed, even as a young man, was counterintuitive and deeply important. Those who adapted best to catastrophic disruption were not always the strongest, wealthiest, or most protected. They were often people with very little external security, but with something internal that held. They were people who could lose themselves in purposeful activity. Artists who kept drawing. Craftspeople who kept building. Scientists who kept asking questions. Musicians who kept practicing. Surgeons who focused completely on the next incision. Teachers who poured themselves into students despite instability. These people were not escaping reality. They were entering it more fully. That state, total absorption, clear goals, immediate feedback, effort that feels demanding but not overwhelming, is what Csikszentmihalyi would later name flow. In times of chaos, the mind naturally drifts toward rumination. What have we lost? Anxiety, what's coming next? Or despair, nothing I do matters. Flow interrupts that cycle by anchoring attention in the present moment. Not through denial, not through distraction, but through engagement. When someone enters flow, attention narrows, self-consciousness quiets, effort feels coherent, action and awareness merge. This preserves a sense of agency, the feeling that one can still act meaningfully in the world, even if the world is unstable. That sense of agency is psychologically protective. It prevents the collapse into learned helplessness. It keeps identity intact when external labels, profession, status, nationality, are stripped away. This is why Csikszentmihalyi's survivors did not break even when circumstances did. Economically, flow-oriented individuals adapted better because they were skill-centered rather than position-centered. When institutions collapse, titles mean nothing, but skills still function. A craftsperson who can focus deeply adapts tools. A teacher who can engage meaningfully adapts context. A scientist who can sustain curiosity adapts questions. An artist who can work through difficulty adapts materials. Flow cultivates transferable competence, the ability to learn, adjust, and refine skills under pressure. This made people more economically resilient in disrupted systems, black markets, informal economies, and post-war reconstruction. They didn't wait for stability. They worked inside instability. Socially flow-oriented people often became stabilizing forces. Not because they dominated or led loudly, but because purposeful engagement radiates steadiness. Someone absorbed in meaningful work listens better, reacts less impulsively, contributes rather than competes, models continuity. This made them valuable in fractured communities. They became teachers, mentors, builders of trust. Flow is inherently pro-social because it requires feedback, responsiveness, and attunement to reality. It is hard to be cruel when fully engaged. Hard to be cynical when absorbed in creation. Hard to be nihilistic when effort still matters. Why this matters to hope is kindled, you may ask. This is why flow belongs so naturally beside Frankl in our work. Frankl said meaning makes survival possible. Csikszentmihalyi showed how meaning is enacted, moment by moment, task by task, effort by effort. Flow is not happiness. It is not comfort. It is not ease. It is the practice of remaining human under pressure. And that is why flow exists at all. Not as a productivity hack, not as a self-help trick, but as a survival strategy for people living through collapse, economic, political, personal, or psychological. Flow is what happens when effort regains meaning. And where effort has meaning, hope can survive. And what is flow? Flow is sometimes described as happiness, but that description misses the point. Flow is not pleasure. It is not comfort. It is not ease. Flow happens when challenge and skill meet. When a task is too easy, we drift into boredom. When it's too hard, we collapse into anxiety. But when it sits just at the edge of our ability, when it asks something of us, we enter flow. In flow, time distorts. Self-consciousness quiets. Attention narrows. Effort feels meaningful. Action and awareness merge. This is not escapism. This is presence. And psychologically, this matters enormously. Despair thrives in unstructured attention. Anxiety feeds on rumination. Depression grows where effort feels pointless. Flow interrupts that spiral, not by numbing pain, but by reintroducing agency. Here's where flow joins the great works we've studied. In the Odyssey, Odysseus survives not because he is happy, but because he is engaged. Every trial demands skill, wit, restraint, endurance. He remains active, even in grief. In Don Quixote, the tragedy is not imagination, it's disconnection. When imagination loses grounding, flow collapses into delusion. In Frankenstein, Victor loses flow entirely. His obsession fractures effort from meaning. Work without integration becomes destruction. In 1984, totalitarianism's greatest weapon is not force, it is the destruction of attention. When thought is colonized, flow becomes impossible. Csikszentmihalyi is addressing the same crisis, from psychology rather than fiction. Who controls your attention controls your life. Flow is an act of resistance. Flow does not promise justice. It does not erase trauma. It does not replace moral responsibility. It does not fix broken systems. This is crucial. Flow can exist in unethical systems. A tyrant can experience flow. A machine can optimize attention. That's why Hope is Kindled always asks a second question. Flow toward what? This is where Csikszentmihalyi must be held in conversation with Gandhi, Dickens, and Dostoevsky. Attention without ethics becomes obsession. Skill without compassion becomes cruelty. Mastery without love becomes control. Flow is powerful, but it must be aimed. So where is the hope? Not in happiness. Not in success. Not in escape. Hope lives in practice. Flow teaches us that even when the world is unstable, we can still choose meaningful effort, shape attention, intentionally build inner order without denying outer chaos. This mirrors what we saw in A Wrinkle in Time. Hope is formation, not rescue. Meg doesn't wait for fear to leave. She acts anyway. Flow is that same courage, scaled to daily life. 5 minutes of writing. An hour of careful listening. A craft practiced imperfectly. A conversation entered fully. This is not triumph. This is maintenance of the soul. Most of us may not change the world in grandiose ways, but we can all make significant changes and have our own profound and enduring impact, protecting other things that are just as important. Our ability to care. Our capacity to concentrate. Our willingness to engage rather than withdraw. Flow does not save the universe, but it saves attention. And attention, as every tyrant and artist knows, is where meaning lives. Before we close, I want to offer one important clarification, especially for listeners who, like me, are thoughtful about where we place our attention. Flow is not an invitation to disappear from the world. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi never argued that we should abandon relationships, responsibilities, or reflection in the name of focus. Flow is not a permanent state, a moral badge, or a replacement for human connection. It is a temporary way of engaging deeply, not a way of withdrawing. If immersion in an activity leaves you more closed off, more irritable when interrupted, or less available to the people who matter, then that isn't healthy flow. That's avoidance wearing the costume of purpose. Healthy flow has edges. It begins. It ends. And it returns you to the world more attentive, not less. In the language of Hope is Kindled, flow should never replace companionship. In all honesty, as I am writing this, I am taking notes on how my own flow is off when I'm distant or cut off from the world and the people in my life. Proper communication with those around us should be integral to proper flow in today's day and age. It is important that we prioritize and practice good communication whenever and wherever possible. Flow, like every powerful human capacity, intelligence, imagination, ambition, needs direction. Flow helps us focus. Hope helps us choose what deserves that focus. So if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. Enter deeply into meaningful work, yes, but always come back. Let your attention sharpen, but let your heart stay open. And remember that the point is not to escape life, but to participate in it more fully. That balance, engagement without disappearance, is where flow becomes not just productive, but humane. And that, ultimately, is where hope lives. Not in waiting, not in wishing, not in the illusion that things will somehow resolve themselves. Hope is not optimism. It is not denial. Hope is the decision to show up fully, to give our attention, our effort, and our care to what is in front of us, even when the future refuses to offer guarantees. That is what flow ultimately offers us. Not happiness, but participation. And sometimes, participation is enough to keep the light burning. I know I'm good with that. I know that I am thankful each and every day for the time that is given to me. Thank you, as always, for walking with me. Good journey.